We usually rank countries by their total GDP or stock market valuations, but those numbers are sterile. If you really want to decode a country's identity, you have to look at its flagship company, the single enterprise that best captures what that nation actually does to survive. Look at the extremes. France projects its cultural heritage through LVMH, an empire built entirely on the intangible idea of elegance and refinement. Meanwhile, Niger exports something far more elemental: uranium, culled straight from the earth by the Somaïr Company to power the world's nuclear reactors. These companies didn't reach the top by accident. Their rise was dictated by three invisible forces: the raw lottery of geography, the lasting scars of history, and the absolute necessity to invent when you have nothing else. Once you view the global economy through these three lenses, the chaotic catalog of the world's largest corporations stops being a spreadsheet. It becomes a map of human survival. The first force is the ground itself. Physical geography hands every country a specific deck of cards, and they have to play the hand they're dealt. If you are born on a tiny, isolated sliver of land, your options are immediate and obvious. You turn to the water. In places like Micronesia or the Seychelles, the entire economic engine is driven by maritime logistics and massive commercial fishing fleets. But if you live on a massive continental plate, your economic gravity pulls downward. Across Africa, national identity is tied directly to raw mineral extraction, ripping away the surface to access what's underneath. The Democratic Republic of the Congo leans on some of the richest copper deposits on the planet. Botswana extracts massive quantities of diamonds. And across the Middle East, towering derricks pull the absolute center of regional wealth straight out of the desert sand. Of course, this model requires immense physical exertion, shifting the heaviest burdens onto local populations who sort through the dirt and rock by hand for fractions of the final profit. Relying entirely on the geological lottery pays the bills, but it rarely builds an economic superpower. It usually locks a nation into serving as a permanent raw material supplier for someone else's factories. When nature doesn't provide the answer, human intervention steps in. For centuries, expanding empires treated foreign lands as blank slates, intentionally engineering entire economies to feed their own domestic needs. The British wanted tea to meet their soaring demand, but their climate couldn't support it, so they transplanted the crop to Sri Lanka, organizing thousands of local laborers to harvest it. Today, Ceylon tea remains a massive pillar of the Sri Lankan economy. When nature doesn't provide the answer, human intervention steps in. For centuries, expanding empires treated foreign lands as blank slates, intentionally engineering entire economies to feed their own domestic needs. The British wanted tea to meet their soaring demand, but their climate couldn't support it, so they transplanted the crop to Sri Lanka, organizing thousands of local laborers to harvest it. Today, Ceylon tea remains a massive pillar of the Sri Lankan economy. The French and Spanish ran a similar playbook across the tropics, blanketing islands with deep thickets of sugarcane and vast fields of cotton, demanding punishing physical labor to maintain the supply lines to Europe. Over hundreds of years, some of these forced colonial exports matured. In Cuba, the tobacco industry evolved from a Spanish commercial venture into a deep-rooted cultural institution. In modern times, the engineering isn't always colonial. Sometimes it's the violent shock of a political collapse. When the Soviet Union fell and the Balkans fractured, state-run heavy industries evaporated overnight. That massive vacuum left millions of people needing basic goods and services. Nimble new companies rushed in. Supermarket chains and regional tech startups exploded in growth, becoming the new heavyweights of a reconstructing market. These national champions are living monuments to historical trauma, the enduring proof of the specific transitions and collapses their people were forced to survive. But what if you have no valuable minerals in the ground and no deep industrial history to lean on? You have to invent a way out. In large parts of sub-Saharan Africa, traditional banking infrastructure simply didn't exist. Instead of laying thousands of miles of wire and building concrete bank branches, local developers turned basic cell phones into digital wallets, moving money via text message. Consider Tuvalu. It's an incredibly isolated Pacific nation with almost no natural resources, but it held the rights to the .tv internet domain. monetizing those two letters became a massive financial lifeline. Other nations with limited physical space focus their energy on extreme precision. They take raw, low-value materials, like ordinary silicon sand, and engineer it into infinitely scalable microchips and software architecture. When the physical world offers zero advantages, sheer human necessity kicks in, forcing nations to generate immense wealth via the digital landscape. The global economy isn't one uniform machine. It is a highly localized patchwork of survival strategies. You dig up what's under your feet, you repurpose the leftovers of history, or you invent something nobody else has thought of. New Zealand started as a remote island doomed to isolation, but by embracing refrigerated shipping in the 19th century, it exported its dairy across the ocean, building a global empire out of milk and butter. Whether a country is extracting crude oil, coding financial software, or fermenting sugarcane, the end result is exactly the same. Every corporate giant is simply a local solution to our universal human need to build